Friend, I'm getting ready to blow your mind. I'm getting ready to blow your mind. Let's talk. So the other day I came in and I talked about how the Department of Justice has been doing an investigation into some of these content creators who are right-wing extremists and have been pushing Russian propaganda. Right? Remember the video? I was like, bitch, these mofos was making $100,000 per video that they were putting out. Well, yesterday I was scrolling over there on the TikTok and I came across Hawk, and Hawk said that there was a list of 600 influencers that the Department of Justice has. And I was like, bitch, what? So you know what I did, right? I got to digging. All I had was 600 additional influencers on a list in regards to Russian propaganda that the Department of Justice had. I went on over to the Twitter. I put in there 600 influencers, and an article from Wired came back. So I read that article, and in that article, it told me that the Department of Justice was doing an investigation, and it linked to a press release over on the Department of Justice's website. And so I clicked that link, and bitch, this is what I got. This right here. This press release talks about how the Department of Justice did an investigation into totally different Russian companies. And as a result of that investigation, they have seized 32 internet domains. What these companies were doing, they were mimicking legitimate websites. So like for the Washington Post, which is an example that they used in the press release, for the Washington Post, these Russian companies, instead of what they would do is, Washington Post website is WashingtonPost.com, right? So what these Russian companies would do, they would create a website that mimicked the Washington Post, but the address would be WashingtonPostPM.com, right? Just like how they mimic our profiles here on TikTok, right? Everything about the page will, for me example, everything about the page will look like my page, the profile picture, the bio, but the name of the page will be slightly different. So my page is the real Tabitha Speaks or Tabitha Speaks Politics, whichever, right? The fake page will have Tabitha Speaks with a period at the end, or Tabitha Speaks with a period at the beginning, or they will put in another S in Speaks, things where people won't directly pick up on it. But because it looks just like mine, people think it's me. And so people will log on to that page, people will go onto this website, and everything about the website will look like, in this instance, the Washington Post. But all of the information on the website is Russian propaganda. So that was the basis of these operations right here. And that's tied to these 32 internet domains that the Department of Justice has now seized. I think there's like 3 or 4 of these different Russian companies that was doing this shit. Now, on to the information on this list of 600 additional content creator or social media influencers, right? You get that information directly from the affidavit that's linked in this press release. And bitch, remember I told you I found that article over on Wired that started me off in the right direction. Well, in that post over on Twitter, it had highlighted a part of this affidavit, number 66 of the affidavit. And so that's exactly where my ass went, to number 66 of the affidavit. Let me read this for you. SDA, now SDA is one of the Russian companies that was a part of this operation. SDA documents further reveal that SDA extensively monitors and collects information about a large number of media organizations and social media influencers. One document revealed a list of more than 2,800 people, content creators, on various social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, and I promise you TikTok and YouTube is also a part of that. Now, these 2,800 individuals, they span over 81 countries, and SDA identified as influencers including television and radio hosts and politicians and bloggers and journalists and businessmen and professors, think tank analysts, veterans, professors, and comedians. When referring to politicians, the list often mentioned which U.S. state and or political party they represent and the position they held in Congress. The U.S.-based influencers accounted for approximately 21% of the accounts. So when you do the math, that's about 600 of these 2,800 people that this company had on their list that now the Department of Justice has, baby. These people were being monitored by this Russian company, SDA. On another list of over 1,900 anti-influencers, bitch, anti-influencers will be us because we weren't pushing Russian propaganda. We weren't standing for Russian propaganda. We were actually putting out content that showed that the Russian propaganda was just that, Russian propaganda. There's a list. They had a list of us. Okay? And now the Department of Justice also has that list. So now when we think about this, they had a list of us who were fighting against the Russian propaganda. So when you ask, tell me why we were banned again, if these companies had a list of those that were pushing the Russian propaganda and they amplified those content creators and possibly paid those content creators, what do you think they were doing to us who were speaking out against the Russian propaganda? Baby, they had their troll farms, their bots to do what? Report our pages. Now, that's not in these documents. That's what I surmise. Because why do they have a list of anti-influencers? Anti-influencers meaning those of us who were calling out the Russian propaganda. That's what happened to our pages. And because TikTok's reporting system is so fucked up, our accounts were banned when they trounced on our accounts to massively report our content. I hope these lists are made public. I would be curious to know who's on the list of their influencers, the ones that they loved, and who was on the list of anti-influencers. Listen, I did a podcast episode, my first in 2 years, going into detail about this press release. You can get it over on the U to the Tube.